Part 61. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 601. Chapter 601 I promise not to beat you to death. Li Lei was still standing by the fence, the late summer wind ruffling his clothes. Hearing Xiaoling's smiling voice, the smile in his eyes deepened and his voice was slightly hoarse. Then I'm leaving. After saying that, he hung up the phone and really turned around and left. What? Xiaoling was stunned and looked at his back, furious. This man is really going too far. He didn't know if he would try hard enough and say a few soft words to coax her, wouldn't she just let him in? Humph, straight men have cancer and are petty. Asshole. The evening breeze is slightly smoky. His back disappeared into the depths of the red wall and ivy. Xiaolingsun was about to cry and regretted so much. It was okay to be so arrogant. Woo, she should have opened the door for the boss just now. She missed him so much. Woo. Xiaoling's classmate lowered her head and pointed at her fingers, feeling unhappy. Suddenly, I heard a familiar voice behind me. Hi, my little beauty. It's Li Lei. She turned back in surprise, her clear and bright eyes shining, and she rushed towards him and gave him a big hug. Li Lei, after the hug, she hit him hard again. You bastard. You lied to me. I saw you leaving. Yes. Woohoo. He smiled and rubbed her head. Miss me? No, she was arrogant again. But I miss you. He still smiled, leaned over and kissed her. The warm fragrance and soft jade in his arms were full of happiness. It was not in vain that he climbed over the wall from the backyard. You still want to leave if you miss me? She was still unhappy. I'm not leaving, he said softly, holding her to the side and sitting down on the small sofa. Xiaozu, are you okay? Have you been frightened by Nangang Kinja? After receiving her call, he rushed come here, lest she suffer a loss in the confrontation with Nangang Kinja. I'm fine. Thinking of Nangang Kinja's face, Xiaoling still felt frightened. What kind of medicine did you give her? It's so scary. Directed corrosive agent, Li Lei said casually. Some time ago, I escorted a batch of goods for the Wei family, and the Wei family gave it to me as a reward. There are also 2 bottles, one can corrode the hands, and the other can corrode the feet. Xiaoling shuddered. It was still scary. They. She swallowed hard. What on earth does the Wei family do? The potions they research are so terrible. The Wei family's medicines are very popular in the black market. According to legend, they are also suppliers of biological and chemical weapons to several major countries. If you encounter danger outside, reporting my name doesn't work. Li Lei's voice paused slightly. Suddenly, he thought of his grandfather who made things difficult for him in every possible way. You can report Wei Shaiyin's name. Oh, Xiaoling didn't think anything of it. What danger could she be in? There was another layer of uneasiness in my heart. Is Nangang Kinja okay? Are you worried about her? She. Xiaoling hesitated for a moment, then said, she is not worthy of death. Are we going too far? She knew that Li Lei was doing it for her own good and was protecting her. She was afraid that these words would make her. He was unhappy, and as he spoke, he watched his face carefully. Li Lei was not unhappy at all. He stroked her long, smooth hair and said in a soft voice, you are so soft-hearted. What should you do if you leave me? I'm not soft-hearted. She tried her best to look fierce. Okay, don't be soft-hearted. He smiled, paused for a few seconds, and then said, don't worry, Nangang Kinja is fine. The scope of the directional corrosive agent will not spread. Her face looks scary. In fact, besides eating, it's a wind leak, but nothing else has much impact. Once I give her the antidote, she will recover slowly. Xiaoling breathed a sigh of relief when she heard what he said. Li Lei saw this and sighed. This girl, she still says she is not soft-hearted? Fortunately, he had known for a long time that she couldn't bear to watch her kill a fish, So he specifically chose one of the many methods that looked scary but was actually the least harmful. Otherwise, she would still be tortured to death by her conscience. Then give her the antidote, Xiaoling said. You don't want the remaining 75 billion, Li Lei asked. Didn't you say she has no money? Xiaoling calmed down. In fact, what I just said to Li Lei on the phone about don't let me in without money was just flirting. If Nangang Kinja really ran out of money, she couldn't let her pay off the debt with her life. Anyway, it's enough to pay 5 billion for a quarrel in a lingerie store. Li Lei said, Nangang Kinja has no money, but the Nangang family still has money. Xiaoling said, 75 billion, you are really going to bankrupt them. What grudges are there? I won't offend anyone unless they offend me, Li Lei sneered. Xiao thought about how many of these so-called aristocratic families wanted to marry their daughters to him, and he had clearly investigated his relationship with Xiaoling earlier. They knew clearly that he loved Xiaoling, but they were not afraid to sell their daughter to death, and even went so far as to murder Xiaoling. Xiaoling didn't know that the bodyguards he had placed in the dark had helped her prevent several car accidents and murders these days. Li Lei didn't want to scare her by saying these things. However, that doesn't mean he won't fight back. The Nangang family is not as innocent as you think, he said lightly. Their family is also involved in the underworld. The difference is that our Li family is engaged in business such as arms, casinos, and pledges, while Nangang's family is in the underworld. They are drug dealers, and they also sell living people and human organs. Xiaoling shuddered when she heard this. Such a thing is too far away for her, as far away as a fantasy. Their money is not clean, Li Lei said. Even if it's all given to you, they still deserve it? Xiaoling didn't know what to say. If the money really came from that kind of money, her hands would burn even if she held it, and she would probably have nightmares at night. Have I told you about the Li family's past? Li Lei gently touched her long hair and asked softly. She shook her head in a daze. Therefore, Li Lei said, the Li family originally lived in China. In the late Qing dynasty, people were in dire straits. One of the Li family's ancestors could not survive, so he smuggled overseas. At that time, many people starved to death on a ship. The dozen or so people who were lucky enough to survive were all emaciated and became laborers. These workers were beaten, scolded, and bullied at will by the foreman, and more than half of them died one after another. The remaining 3 or 4 people, led by my grandfather, took advantage of a stormy night to kill the contractor and occupied the small construction site, and then they gradually found a way to survive. This is the prototype of the Jiahe gang. Because, at that time, there was no legal or normal assistance that could help these hard-working workers. They had no choice but to fight, kill, and rely on their strength to make a living. They gradually grew stronger and had their own morality and order. Later, all the poor people who smuggled into that area would join Grandpa's gang. The gang could give them work, give them food to eat, and uphold justice for them. To provide them with shelter from wind and rain. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 602. Chapter 602. Please let me go. Xiaoling was a little dumbfounded when she heard this. In her impression, gangsters were all bad people, but she did not expect that the Li family had such a history. Li Lei continued, after 2 or 3 generations of struggle, the living conditions of these workers have gradually improved. Many people do not want to continue to work as coolies, so they start small businesses, or go to the streets to try their luck. Hope to find a decent job. But soon, everyone discovered how difficult it is for Chinese people living overseas to integrate into the local mainstream circles. They have suffered discrimination, exclusion, and oppression. These sufferings are unimaginable. Led by the ancestors of the Li family, the gang once again protected everyone. Use darkness to fight darkness, use violence to fight violence, protect the shaky shops of these poor Chinese people, and help the elderly, weak, women and children who have been bullied to seek justice. This is how the Li family's power grew and grew, becoming the largest overseas Chinese power. Li Lei said softly to Xiaoling, Xiaoling, although our family is a gang, we have good intentions, which is different from other gangs. Later, the rise of those gangsters, such as the Nangong family, are just for profit, smuggling and selling drugs, forcing girls into prostitution, and they do whatever they can to deal with such families. Xiaoling was frightened when she heard this. She couldn't imagine that a young lady with such an elegant temperament like Nangong Kinja could have such a dark background. Then, these dark things, she asked with difficulty, is Nangong Kinja involved? There was a cold smile in Li Lei's eyes. No one in their family is clean. He investigated Nangong Kinja's resume very clearly. She once threw girls who offended him into a gang, the girl was raped to death, and the girl's skin was peeled off and made into a lampshade. Li Lei once protested to Mr. Li, saying that he did not want to marry such a cruel and ruthless woman. Mr. Li said, Xiao Lei, you are too principled. You are a good hand in managing the Bidao business empire, but you may not be able to develop the business very well. You need a ruthless internal assistant to complement you. Nangong Kinja is a good choice. Li Lei said, I don't need a woman's help. Mr. Li said, if you don't have a dark advisor, you can't even fight Li Feng. Whether you can't win or not, you have to try. Nonsense. The conversation between the grandfather and grandson ended unhappily. Actually, Li Lei knew very well that all the dark advisors and ruthless aides were all fake. The old man just wants to settle his marriage as soon as possible, no matter who it is, as long as the woman is not Xiaoling. He kissed Xiaoling's forehead, stay away from Nangong Kinja. Xiaoling's voice was a little dull. Li Lei continued to help her recover the 75 billion. Nangong Kinja had no money, so he asked the Nangong family for it. Within a few days, the entire Nangong family was in a state of turmoil, and the entire Chinese upper-class circle, both overseas and domestic, knew about this. The second young master of the Li family, and Nangong, for a female star. The family fell out. Not only did he disfigure Miss Nangong, but he also demanded a huge sum of 75 billion. There is an unwritten rule on. The father's debt is repaid by the son, and the son's debt is repaid by the father. It is natural that if one person is in debt, the whole clan will be affected. Li Lei completely blocked the Nangong family's domestic business and sneered at their head Nangong Bohai, when will I pay back the 75 billion, and when will I let you go? Nangong Bohai also sneered, at worst, I won't do business in China. With a wave of his sleeves, he took his family back to Southeast Asia. Nangong Kinja cried and begged her father to save her and treat her face. However, a huge sum of 75 billion is enough to bankrupt the entire Nangong family. How could Nangong Bohai abandon the family's century-old foundation for a daughter? If you make any more noise, I will expel you from the house, he said fiercely to Nangong Kinja. Nangong Kinja's sisters gloated over their misfortune. Ha, in the whole family, doesn't Nangong Kinja always think that she is the most beautiful? No matter what I do, I have to be strong and step on my sisters to get the limelight. Now I am fine. With a disfigured face, I will never be able to get married in the future. They ridiculed Nangong Kinja. Nangong Kinja was ashamed, angry, and frightened. She was as anxious as an ant on a hot pot and shed tears all day long. In Boga Garden, Li Lei plays chess with Du Yunfan, the young executive director of Du Group. Black and white chess pieces are crisscrossed on the agar wood chessboard, and each step follows the rhythm of flowing clouds and flowing water. You seem to be in a good mood. Du Yunfan dropped a white piece and chatted with Li Lei. Li Lei dropped a sunspot and followed him with a lazy smile. Someone is helping me deal with the Nangong family. How can I be in a bad mood? Nangong Bohai dared to confront him. He only relied on the fact that his base camp was overseas, and overseas Li Lei has full command of the family. Nangong Bohai bet that Li Lei couldn't touch him. However, he forgot that there was Du Yunfan. Du Yunfan is Li Lei's best friend, and more importantly, he was Nangong Kinja's fiancé. In order to climb the high branches of the Li family, the Nangong family broke off their engagement with the Du family, which offended them severely. Although our Du family is not in a good position, we can still have the upper hand against the Nangong family. However, Li Er, don't forget that you suppressed the Nangong family with the help of my Du family. We also share in those territories and businesses. How could I forget? Li Lei was still very relaxed. I feel at ease doing business with you. In fact, both of them knew very well that even if Li Lei didn't ask the Du family for help, the Du family would still suppress the Nangong family. The heir of the family had their engagement annulled, which was a great shame and humiliation. If they didn't come back with revenge, how would the Du family's face be saved? It's just that with Li Lei, the blow is stronger and more deadly. 1 month later, the Nangong family was forced to the edge of bankruptcy. Nangong Bohai finally came to beg Li Lei, second young master Li, let me go, please let me go. He understood that it was useless to beg the Du family. It seemed that the Du family was responsible for this matter. In fact, if without Li Lei's support behind him, there would be no way the power and strength of thunder could be achieved today. Li Lei said, it's so funny. Do you know how to ask for help at this time? I will promise you whatever you want. 75 billion. Okay, just 75 billion, Nangong Bohai cried sadly and gritted his teeth. With a loss of 75 billion, the Nangong family can still win a few million to breathe. If it is destroyed by others, there may not be even a few million left. Also, drive Nangong Kinja out of the house. What? Then the Nangong family master won't still feel sorry for his daughter who can get into trouble, right? Li Lei smiled lazily. The spring breeze was warm, she offended my woman, and she still wants to escape unscathed. He wanted everyone to see, what will happen to a woman who dares to trample on Xiaoling. So what if he has the backing of Mr. Li? Nangong Kinja is a lesson learned from the past. From now on, anyone who dares to make any decisions about him must think carefully. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 603. Chapter 603 Charitable Foundation. Xiaoling recorded songs and made announcements as usual. Until one day, Li Lei dropped 75 billion in front of her. She looked at the several bank cards in shock, unable to recover for a long time, and murmured to Li Lei, quick, come here and pinch me, let me see if I am dreaming. Li Lei smiled and said, little pig, these are all yours. Xiaoling still couldn't come to her senses. Her brain was frozen for a long time. She touched one of the cards and murmured, why are the Nangong family willing to give so much money? Are they bankrupt? Well, it's bankrupt, Li Lei said easily. Dare to assassinate Xiaoling's family and make them bankrupt. However, for a big gangster family like the Nangong family, which has countless enemies, there is actually no difference between bankruptcy and death. Former enemies will soon come to visit, and then, Nangong, the bodies of many people in the family will sink to the bottom of the high seas, never to be recovered. Li Lei has no psychological burden for such an ending. He is just a winner and a loser. He smiled and tried to please Xiaoling. The Nangong family has a lot of assets, including poppy fields, casinos, brothels, drugs, etc. I was afraid that you couldn't manage it, so I asked people to dispose of all these assets, launder the money, and distribute it to you. I have deposited it in banks in several countries. You can use the money to buy new properties. If you don't know how to save money, I can also find a financial consultant to help you. Xiaoling really didn't think that much at first, but thinking about it, the 75 billion should be collected from the sale of all the Nangong family's properties. It has everything. If it is not converted into clean cash and handed over to her, not to mention that she could manage it regardless, I'm afraid it would be considered a minor offense to be betrayed. Li Lei was still thoughtful. She said, what can I do with the money? Li Lei has already given her some advice: invest in various fields, including movable and real estate. If you choose high-quality companies, you can buy some shares. High-tech enterprises are also a good choice. He rambled. Over there, Xiaoling said, is it good to do charity? What? Li Lei was stunned. I mean, do charity. An idea slowly formed in Xiaoling's mind: sitting on a mountain of gold and silver, what's the use to me? I can buy a bunch of clothes, a few bags, and buy a few properties every year at most. The resorts and villas are just about enough. How many 100 million can I spend? I don't know how to take care of the extra money. Even if I have a financial consultant, it's just a waste of time. It's better to use it for charity. Li Lei had known for a long time that his sister would be favored and disgraced regardless of whether he was rich or poor, but he did not expect that she would be favored or disgraced to such an extent. He was stunned for a few seconds before asking, why do you suddenly think of doing this? It's something I've always wanted to do, Xiaoling said with a smile. It was probably a dream I had when I was a child. You know, I grew up in an orphanage when I was a child. My younger sister Xiao had a serious heart disease, and she had no money to treat it. I am always on the verge of life and death every day. It is also because of that I am willing to follow Pei Xian home. She is still a little sad when talking about that past event. If you were not forced by money, would everything be different? She looked up at Li Lei and said, I don't want other orphans to suffer that kind of pain again. I or my important people are suffering on the line of life and death every night. Let's set up a charity fund. I want them to live healthily and with dignity. Li Lei looked at her tenderly. You make your own decisions about your money. If you decide to build a charity fund, of course I will support you. However, Xiaoling, this fund cannot be done in your name. You must hide behind the scenes. Why? Xiaoling blurted out, and in an instant, she understood. Well, yes, it can't be done in my name. If the public asks me where the money came from, I can't explain it. She is a public figure. Although her income is thought-provoking, it is not outrageous to the extent of tens of billions. Being too ostentatious will inevitably lead to investigation. If the source of the money is exposed, it may not be good. Li Lei said, I will find someone to help you operate it. Or, you can also ask the imperial advisor to help you operate it. He is now a little proud. At first, the imperial advisor only asked him to recover 30 billion plus mental losses. In the end, he forcefully recovered 75 billion for Xiaoling. No, adding the 5 billion that Nangong Kinja gave before, the total was 80 billion. With such a huge property, even if it were placed in a wealthy family, it would still be a first-class wealthy family. Mentioning her brother, Xiaoling had a relaxed smile on her face. She also thought to herself, if her brother knew that her sweetheart was so powerful, would he be surprised and happy? However, there is no need to trouble my brother about the charity fund. He said that I am a lonely person and should have as little contact with my relatives as possible. Xiaoling said to Li Lei, I don't know much about this aspect. How about you help me, help me? You can rest assured that your assets of 75 billion will be handed over to me, Li Lei smiled. 80 billion, Xiaoling corrected and smiled. What are you worried about? He is her man, the one who is destined to stay with each other for a lifetime. If she can't trust each other in matters of money, how can she stay together? Li Lei lowered his head and kissed her gently. This is his Xiaoling, his rare treasure in life. There are thousands of girls in this world. Perhaps she is not the most beautiful in appearance, not the most scheming, has an arrogant temper, and always gets into trouble. However, in her eyes, none of the 80 billion is so natural. He is important, this trust, this love, this character. Unique in the world. Grandpa, you know, maybe in your eyes, there is a better candidate for your grandson's daughter-in-law, but in my heart, I will always only recognize Xiaoling. Li Lei looked at the fair and clean face of the girl in front of him and said, "Okay, I'll take care of it for you." Xiaoling smiled with a crooked eyebrow, "Yeah." Soon later, a charitable foundation was established in the name of Tianyi Company. Xiaoling became a charity ambassador and spokesperson for the foundation, and participated in charity activities in this way. There is a lot of discussion from the outside world. Some people praised her, saying that little Queen Ling not only sings well, but also has a pure heart. Even though she is so popular, she still cares for the sick and weak orphans. She is truly an angel. Some people also sarcastically said that she was just showing off. Gu Lin, the eldest daughter of the Gu family, threw her glass after seeing the news. Ling, that bitch. What's so good about that? Why is she so haunted? It's obviously money from Tianyi. Brother Xiaoli, I'm paying for it, but I'm supporting her to get the limelight. Isn't it great to be a star? Why don't you just follow brother Xiaolei? Lin, what's wrong with you? It was Gu's father, who walked into Gu Lin's room. Dad, I don't accept it. Gu Lin pointed at the news in the magazine and stamped her feet angrily. Look, that cut the ribbon with brother Xiaolei. What does brother Xiaolei's charity fund have to do with her? Father Gu has heard the news a long time ago. At this time, he smiled bitterly and advised his precious daughter, Lin, you probably don't know the origin of this money, right? It's spread throughout the circle. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 604. Chapter 604 Return to the Orphanage. Gu Lin was very angry. What's the origin of this money? Isn't it just brother Xiaolei who used it to flatter that bitch? Charity. What a joke. But Gu's father said, this money belongs to the Nangong family. Nangong's family? Gu Lin was startled, then sneered, Dad, you mean the bankrupt Nangong Kinja's family, right? It was a waste of time for me to treat her as a friend, but in the end, she ate from the bowl and looked at the pot. She is already Du Yunfan's fiancée, but she still hooks up with my brother Lei. After the Nangong family went bankrupt, Nangong Kinja came to Gu Lin and asked Gu Lin to save her. Gu Lin ridiculed her for a while and told her to go away, but Nangong Kinja knelt down and begged, saying that even if she stayed in the Gu family to work hard, Gu Lin must take her in. Her face was still not healed. Although Li Lei had given her the antidote, the disease was gone like silk threads. She had to take care of it very carefully and apply extremely finely ground pearl powder every day. Now Nangong Kinja, where can she have money to buy pearl powder? She cherished her appearance as much as her life and begged Gu Lin. As long as she could give her pearl powder, she would be willing to work for Gu Lin. Gu Lin was also a bad person, so she kept Nangong Kinja in Gu's building as a toilet cleaner. It is also true that evil people will have their own trials and tribulations. Gu's father said, you can ask her where the money from Gu's bankruptcy went. It's tens of billions at least. There are rumors in the circle that Li Lei and the Du family teamed up to swallow up the money. The Du family is in order to take revenge on the Nangong family for regretting their marriage. Li Lei wanted to scare the monkeys and make people stop trying to take advantage of him and Ling. Killing chickens to scare monkeys, Gu Lin screamed, I don't believe it. What's so good about that bitch? How could brother Xiaolei go to war for her? It must have been the Du family who asked brother Xiaolei to help deal with the Nangong family, and brother Xiaolei took action. Definitely. Father Gu hopes that his daughter is right, but all signs indicate that it is impossible. If it weren't for Li Lei's deliberate connivance, the idea of killing a chicken to scare a monkey wouldn't have spread in the world. Since it was widely spread outside and he didn't deny it, then 99% of it was true. Linlin, Father Gu said sincerely, listen to Daddy's advice and don't mess with Yesin Ling. He was afraid that something would happen to his precious daughter like Nangang Kinja. Nangang Kinja was originally such a high-ranking young lady, but she ended up, because he offended someone, he was thrown into overnight, his family was ruined, and his face was disfigured. However, Gu Lin didn't listen. Brother Xiaoli, I wouldn't do that to me. Our two families are family friends, so who does the Nangang family count? If Brother Xiaoli I wants to take action against the Gu family, Grandpa Li won't do it either. This sentence is not wrong. Father Gu was silent for a moment and then said, be careful. Don't worry, Dad. Gu Lin smiled and reached for Gu's father's arm. I have a sense of propriety. She had already made up her mind to find a way to make her presence felt in front of Grandpa Li, so that Gu and Li could, thanks to the friendship between the two families, isn't the position of young mistress of the Li family already within reach? I heard that Grandpa Li likes to eat fish. She started to think about it. As city orphanage. Xiaoling was wearing a plain blue silk satin dress and a platinum four-leaf clover bracelet on her wrist. With Li Lei's support, she stepped out of his off-road vehicle. Behind the off-road vehicle is a convoy of several vehicles of different sizes. Some people got out of those cars, including agents, assistants, bodyguards, photographers from charity funds, and so on. They shouted in front of each other and walked towards the orphanage, surrounding Xiaoling and Li Lei. As for the orphanage, the old director and many teachers lined up to welcome him. Xiaoling took off her sunglasses, raised her head gently, and looked at the mottled old courtyard gate in front of her, the familiar low wall and old banyan tree beside the door, and was filled with emotion. How many years have passed, I think back then, she grew up in this small world. Even eating a piece of candy was a luxury, and she looked forward to being adopted by kind people every day. Unexpectedly, one day I will return home in glory. The old dean was older than he remembered, with gray hair and a crutch with one hand tremblingly. With respect and humble enthusiasm in his eyes, he faced Li Lei and Xiaoling, who were decades younger than him, and said, welcome, welcome. Xiaoling felt a little sad and quickly stepped forward to support him. Old director, it's sunny and your legs and feet are inconvenient. Come in and sit down quickly. She understood why he was so humble and enthusiastic. The orphanage was always short of funds, and those who came here to do charity were all donors. There is no need to offend, as the money for the children's medical treatment, education, and even new clothes will all fall on the benefactor. She was very familiar with this look. I think back on, the old dean would be so cautious every time he received a group of people doing charity work or adopting people. Thousands of emotions came to my mind at once. Her nose was sore and she said softly to the old dean, slow down. The old dean was flattered, don't, monsieur, don't, how can I bother such a big shot like you? I can just go by myself, I can go by myself. Other teachers were also surprised. There are many people who come here to do charity, but most of them regard themselves as benefactors, condescending and giving alms. But what about Monsieur in front of her? Not only is he not arrogant, he is also so respectful and attentive to the old dean. The photographers behind were frantically capturing this scene. So the teachers were relieved again. This Monsieur was just better at showing off than others. Li Lei didn't think so. He knew that Xiaoling was the former Queen Xiaoling, and he also knew that she came out of this small and dilapidated orphanage in her previous life. She must have a deep relationship with this place. Li Lei took a few steps forward and supported the old dean with her. I thought to myself, is this old man the one who took care of the young Xiaoling? Thanks to him, Xiaoling would not be homeless. He looked at the old dean with a bit more sincere respect. With the help of these two big men, the old dean could hardly walk any further. He was so flattered that he kept saying, "How can I trouble you too? Big man, want to hurt me." Xiaoling finally couldn't help it and smiled sadly. "How could it be, Jesha? You deserve it, really. You see, there have been big shots in your orphanage." "Big shot, you mean, Queen Xiaoling?" "Yes," Xiaoling said. After a few words, the old dean felt a little more at ease. As soon as he relaxed, the conversation started. "Isn't it? Xiaoling, she is the pride of our place. Over the years, thanks to her, the orphanage has received a lot of donations. Many of her fans will come here to visit and donate money. Some fans who are well off will even adopt children. Xiaoling has really done a great good deed." "Yeah. Xiaoling doesn't know these things. Since she left the orphanage 20 years ago, she has never been back. Although money is sent regularly, the situation in the orphanage is unknown. Now, I am very pleased to hear the old dean say this." The two men helped the old dean into the reception room. The accompanying teachers also came in one after another. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 605. Chapter 605, The Past of Orphans. The reception room is very spacious. There are not many furnishings, just a set of sofas and tables, and children's watercolor paintings hanging on the walls. The old dean pointed to one of the paintings and introduced it to them. It was painted by Xiaoling. Li Lei stepped forward to take a look and saw a simple graffiti, a spring scene with blooming irises everywhere. "It's very beautiful," he admired sincerely. "You are so amazing at such a young age." Xiaoling glanced sideways at him and saw that he really liked it. A smile appeared on her lips. In fact, they were not very good at painting. The orphanage could not afford any good teachers, and it was not expected that these children, who could not even afford food and clothing, would be very successful in art in the future. Learning to paint was just a matter of cultivating their sentiments. There is no technique worthy of praise in this painting. However, it was not her technique that Li Lei praised. Such a bright and free-spirited color scheme, with a somewhat abstract style, just like Xiaoling's singing voice, makes people like it at first sight. "She is a good child," the old dean said lovingly, with a hint of nostalgia in his voice. "A good boy who is always causing trouble, fighting, and grabbing candy for his sister?" Xiaoling remembered that she was a problem child at that time. She was not in harmony with the other children in the orphanage. She was always noisy to the teacher and the dean, asking them to allocate funds for her sister's medical treatment. Some teachers said that disciplining her alone was more troublesome than disciplining 2 or 3 boys. Thinking about the past, her eyes were filled with nostalgia. The vice president and the academic director said, "Mr. Li, Miss Ye, you are welcome to come here. Please sit down quickly. This is tea grown in the courtyard. Please forgive me for the rudeness." Xiaoling remembered the old tea tree. When she was a child, the academic dean cherished it as if it were a treasure. He kept saying that the courtyard could not afford good tea, so he had to grow tea for the distinguished guests. He warned the children not to damage the tea tree and said that everyone's donations, adoptions, etc. would all end up on this old tea tree. Xiaoling lowered her head and took a sip. It tasted both sweet and bitter. Li Lei also lowered his head to taste it. After a moment, he raised his head and smiled. "Longjing tree over 40 years old. It's really good." "Mr. Li knows his stuff," the dean said with a smile. "No more, no less, exactly 45 years. The atmosphere became more and more harmonious and the conversation got to the point. This time Li Lei came with a large amount of donations and various long-term benefits. In the future, he will provide regular physical examinations, vaccinations, and distribution of school and daily necessities to the children. Most importantly, a special fund for serious diseases has been established specifically for children who cannot afford treatment. The old dean and teachers are very grateful. The photographers who followed took pictures of the entire donation process, as well as a group photo of both parties. In the picture, Xiaoling, dressed in a simple and elegant dress, and the old dean stood in the middle of the crowd. The two of them held a large donation document together, with smiles on their faces, showing that this was a smooth charity. Standing on the other side of her was Li Lei. His handsomeness only accentuated her petiteness, making him look like an angel. He deliberately flattered her and gave her the chance to shine on such an occasion. When the news comes out, everyone will remember her in the center of the screen holding the document, and they will all say that the female star named Ye Xingling is so kind. He was satisfied. After the donation ceremony was over, Xiaoling proposed to walk around the orphanage. The old dean wanted to send someone to guide them, so Xiaoling said, "There's no need to bother anyone. It's just me and Li Lei who will wander around casually. We won't take any assistants or photographers with us. The teachers can go ahead as well. There's no need to follow." Generally speaking, when visitors come, the hospital cannot help but accompany them. But this time, the old dean nodded happily and agreed. He had a very good impression of them. It is rare to find such a donor who seriously considers children. Every year, although there are many companies and celebrities from all walks of life who come to donate, most of them ask the hospital to donate their children in order to pursue news effect. They were called to come forward, donate money in front of the children, and ask the children to smile and say thank you with a bow. The children are still so young and it is not their fault that they are poor. Making them feel that they are being given away for many years will hurt their self-esteem. Xiaoling and Li Lei considered this very carefully. They didn't even ask the children to come to them. Even when the hospital offered to send some children to greet them with flowers at the door, they refused. "Don't disturb them," Xiaoling said to Li Lei at that time. "I used to be a member of the honor guard. I know that feeling." Li Lei obeyed her wishes. At this time, the old dean returned the favor. "You two were just walking around in the yard. By the way, Unit 15 in Building 2 was Xiaoling's residence back then. Ward number 9 in the building diagonally opposite was Xiaoyu's residence. Now, both of these places have been preserved as tourist attractions. If you are interested, you can visit them." Xiaoling thanked the old dean and left with Li Lei. Actually, even if the old dean didn't tell her, she still planned to take Li Lei to see her former residence. That was the place where she lived when she was a child. It was simple but simple. Back then, she pointed out to Li Lei as she led him away, "Every morning when I get up, I rush to the cafeteria to grab steamed buns. There is a limited supply of meat buns every day. If I go late, there are only vegetable buns." Li Lei laughed at her. Snack. Down the corridor, several children laughed and ran past them one after another. The shadows of the iris flowers are modeled on the ground. Xiaoling said, "It's for Xiaoyu." She was very picky at that time and only ate a little bit of meat filling in the buns for breakfast. So, I always grabbed 2 buns and scooped out the meat fillings for her. I ate them. Actually, she doesn't like to eat steamed buns. What she loves is the tea eggs in the canteen, but each child can only receive one kind of food. In order to let her sister have meat fillings, she has never eaten tea eggs in those years. Li Lei didn't expect it to be like this, and felt very sad. "From now on, I will make meat buns for you to eat every day." Xiaoling smiled. "Ginseng buns." "Okay, ginseng buns." Li Lei rubbed her long hair. Xiaoling held the hand of the man she loved, lowered her head, and walked a few steps. Suddenly, she said without any clue, "Actually, Xiaoyu doesn't like to eat steamed buns either." "What?" She took a few steps forward, as if she was sorting out her thoughts. After a long time, she said, "At that time, I was only 7 or 8 years old, and I was a girl. The meat buns in the cafeteria have always been contracted by older children and boys. Even if other children or girls the meat buns, they will soon be forced to hand them over. I don't know how many times I was beaten for grabbing buns. Every time I received the meat buns, I would bury my head and run quickly to the dormitory. It was safe only after I entered the dormitory and locked the door. However, I was often stopped halfway by a group of older kids, who beat me and snatched my buns. Every time I was beaten to death, I tried my best to protect Bayazai. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 606. Chapter 606, The Prayer of the Thousand Paper Cranes. Recalling that past event, her voice gradually became deeper. The fists, kicks and bad words from that time seemed to have returned. They mocked her as a pig, shameless, unruly, and competed with the older children for meat buns. They called her trash and told her why she didn't die. Every word touches my heart. Suddenly, she felt a slight warmth on her shoulders, and a man embraced her into a warm embrace. Xiaoling, Li Lei kissed the top of her hair and said pitifully, "You have suffered." Her eyes were red, and she turned her head to look at the blooming flowers in the garden. It was here, on this road, that they forced her to kneel down and eat the dirt from the ground. Children are more cruel than adults. They pulled her hair and slapped her. Even more outrageous, a boy of 15 or 16 years old asked her to take off her clothes for everyone to see when she was only 7 or 8 years old. Fortunately, she fought hard and was as fierce as a young wolf. Although they never really took off her clothes, it was common for her to be beaten, eat dirt, and have stones thrown at her. Whenever she escorted the bruised meat bun to her sister's ward, she would pause at the door of the room, arrange her clothes and long hair, wipe away the blood on her face, and cover her palm prints. Then, with a nonchalant smile, he gave the meat buns to his sister Xiaoyu. Xiaoyu sometimes gets confused, staring at her sister's face or somewhere on her body. "Sister, did you get into a fight with someone?" "No," Xiaoling always said, "I'm so powerful, who dares to bully me?" "You mean the scratch on my wrist?" "It's okay, I accidentally fell when I was going down the steps." Then Xiaoyu would nod, "Yes, sister is so awesome." Then she smiled happily, "I like eating meat buns the most. Sister, can you bring me meat buns every day?" Looking at her sister, who had been in bed for a long time and was rarely happy, the little Xiaoling also nodded heavily. Until later, the sisters were adopted by Pei Ziyan, and Xiaoling had a falling out with that man and was imprisoned. Xiaoyu came to see her, her eyes flashing with malice and pleasure. "Sister, do you know? In the small garden of the orphanage porch." Xiaoling raised her head from Li Lei's arms and pointed at the building not far away. "Li Lei, did you see it? That building is the window." Li Lei looked towards where she was pointing. It was an old small building with a closed window. It was so dark that he couldn't tell what was inside. "That room is Xiaoyu's ward," Xiaoling said. "She could lie by the window and see those big kids beating me. In fact, she could see it every day. This was her favorite entertainment every morning." Without it, one recalling what her sister said to her with evil eyes flashing during the year she was imprisoned, she is still heartbroken. "Xiaoyu doesn't like eating meat buns at all. She begged me to get them every morning because, she..." Her voice was choked up and she couldn't continue speaking. Li Lei had already understood what she didn't say. Xiaoling worked so hard to grab the buns for her sister, but what the vicious sister wanted to see in her heart was to see her get beaten. How terrible! Li Lei's expression was tense. He only regretted that he didn't know Xiaoling at that time and couldn't protect her from the wind and rain. "Just wait," he said to Xiaoling, I will pay back those debts from those who have harmed you one by one. Xiaoling shook her head and held his hand. You are by my side, that's enough. She once doubted life, wondering if treating others with all her heart and soul would only result in scars in the end. Xiaoyu is, so is Pei Ziyan. She didn't understand what she had done wrong. Just when she was desperate for life, fortunately, she met Li Lei. He is her salvation. It's good that you're by my side, she repeated in a murmur. I will always be here. Li Lei's voice was gentle and reassuring. He held her hand tightly, really wanting to hold it like this and never let go for the rest of his life. The sun is shining brightly in the orphanage, and the air is filled with the chirping of cicadas and the fragrance of flowers in midsummer. The two of them walked slowly along the corridor and came to the dormitory where she had lived when she was a child. Every brick and tile inside is still the same. There is a water cup on the table with the old number 17 on it. That is her cup. It can be seen that this place is cleaned every day and is spotless. There are two more things. A booklet recording her life, which contains a large number of her deeds and photos during her time in the orphanage. A very large glass jar with many colorful paper cranes in it. Li Lei took out the brochure, flipped it through, and said, it says here that when many fans come over, they will throw a paper crane into the jar, with their blessings and wishes written on the paper crane. Hearing what he said, Xiaoling took out a blue paper crane and carefully opened it to look at it. Sure enough, there was a line of words written in black pen on the inside of the paper, Xiaoling in heaven, want happiness. She opened a few more, some were for blessings, and some were folded by children in the same hospital, asking her spirit in heaven to protect them from being adopted by good families. She looked at the handwriting full of longing and smiled bitterly. Even she herself did not fall into a good family. The Pei family seemed to be beautiful, but only she knew the turbulence and suffering and humiliation in the middle. Li Lei saw her looking at those prayers for a long time, but he might have misunderstood them. When we get married in the future, let's adopt some children, he said softly. Xiaoling seems to like children very much. Is it painful for her to be unable to have children? She was slightly startled before saying, okay, Li Lei likes children very much, right? This was not the first time adoption had been mentioned to her. Xiaoling felt a dull pain in her heart. She could no longer have children, but she still stayed with him selfishly. After all, she owed him. Thinking about this, I felt a little heavy and put down the paper cranes. Li Lei carefully folded the paper cranes back for her and put them back into the glass jar. The two stayed in the room for a while, then left and continued walking forward. This orphanage is very old. After many renovations, it looks mottled with vicissitudes of life, but it has a sense of beauty that remains intact. Because of the celebrity sisters Xiaoling and Xiaoyu, a sightseeing route has been opened in the courtyard. From time to time, you will see signs with labels such as Xiaoling's duty station, Xiaoling practices singing place, and so on. They walk to a small garden. Hide under a clump of iris, a light-colored signboard is engraved in beautiful gilded fonts, the place where Xiaoling and Pei Ziyan first met. She stopped, feeling a little mixed for a moment. Li Lei also stood still, feeling as if a thorn had suddenly been pierced in his heart. He lowered his eyes slightly to prevent her from seeing the look in his eyes. After a long while, he asked in a low voice, is this where it was at the beginning? End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 607. Chapter 607, Holy Land. Xiaoling lowered her head and slowly touched the gilded words with her slender fingertips. How many years has it been? How many years of turbulent waves have passed, but that first encounter is still as clearly imprinted in my heart as the first encounter, and it will never be forgotten even in the next life. She turned around, raised her head, and looked at the small building not far away. On the second floor is the dean's office. The entire wall of floor-to-ceiling windows welcomes the sunlight. Behind the windows is a spacious and quiet space with no one around. The tall and handsome man who looked like a emerged in her mind. That day, he stood silently behind the floor-to-ceiling window, wearing a tight-fitting black suit, overlooking and examining her. Her feet were pierced by nails, and there was a pursuer behind her. She only glanced at him, and then fled away in embarrassment. However, that sudden glimpse became a curse for 2 lives. Xiaoling, let's go home with me. Nowadays, things have changed and people have changed. The person who said that is no longer around. She looked back and said in a very soft voice, "It's all over, let time bury everything." All the glue-like love and cruel blood are condensed into a little cinnabar in the bottom of her heart. Occasionally it will throb and hurt, but it is only that's it. She turned around and left here. Lilei put his hands in his pockets and did not follow her pace immediately. He did not walk slowly step by step until he watched her figure disappear into the depths of the path covered with iris flowers. Going in the opposite direction to her. How much will it cost to remove the monument where Pei Xian and Xiaoling met? In the dean's office, Lilei asked the old dean straight to the point. The old director was surprised. Why do you want to get rid of it? It is not easy to generate income in the orphanage, so it is difficult to take advantage of the celebrity effect. The place where Pei Xian and Xiaoling first met is a popular attraction. Every year, many fans go there to take photos and spread the praises. There are stories about a 1,000-mile horse meeting bowl. Lilei didn't explain much and just asked, "How much is it?" "Mr. Li, this is not a matter of money," the old dean trembled, looking at Lilei earnestly with a wrinkled face. "This stone tablet is not just about generating income for the orphanage, it also carries the children. Our hope, all the children here dream of one day being as lucky as Xiaoling, meeting a rich adopter who loves them, and starting a new life. Mr. Li, you cannot deprive the children of their hope." Lilei was speechless. Why is it so troublesome to remove a stone tablet? But what should he do if the thorn in his heart is not removed? The old dean walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and pointed downstairs. "Mr. Li, look, the child is whispering to the stone tablet. Her name is Xiaofeng, she suffers from spinocerebellar degeneration, and her condition is getting worse every day. She couldn't live for a few years, it was very likely that she would never be adopted and die in the orphanage. However, she did not give up hope. She longed for a miracle every day, hoping that there would be a savior like Mr. Pei Xian. Falling from the sky, just like Xiaoling and Xiaoyu who were seriously ill and dying, taking her away is her only hope. Mr. Li, we will not take away the child's only hope." The old dean looked at him carefully and worriedly. The old dean is old and has seen many people in the orphanage. He knows deeply that these powerful people are not as kind as they appear on the surface. Although he didn't know why Mr. Li in front of him wanted to remove the monument, he knew that these powerful people might use any means to achieve their goals. He was worried. Lilei saw the uneasiness of the old director and said very gently, "Old man, don't be afraid, I will not harm this orphanage. This is the place where Xiaoling was given shelter. Judging from Xiaoling's words and deeds, I have a lot of respect for this old dean, and I think he received a lot of kindness back then. How could he be unfavorable to Xiaoling's benefactor? Well, except Pei Xian." He comforted the old dean and thought for a while. "How about this? I will pay to renovate this monument and turn it into a monument forest, to protect every child who walks out of here and their adopters with their names engraved on it. Wouldn't there be more hope?" The old dean did not expect him to say this. He was stunned for a moment and then said, "Okay. This is indeed a good idea. Let the children see how many happy families have come out of here, so that they can be full of hope during the long waiting years. However, why does Mr. Li in front of me do this?" The old dean could feel that the separate monuments of Pei Xian and Xiaoling might be an eyesore to him. However, how could someone who could not be hit with 8 sticks be an eyesore to Mr. Li? The old dean was puzzled. Lilei got the old dean's permission and left the dean's office in a good mood. Although the stone tablet still cannot be revoked, it can minimize Pei Xian's specialness. From now on, Pei Xian is just an ordinary one among the thousands of adoptees in the orphanage. There is nothing different. As for the place where we first met? Who still remembers it after a year and a half? Ha ha ha. He hummed a tune happily and came out to find Xiaoling. Xiaoling had no idea what he had just done behind her back. At this moment, she was sitting on the bluestone steps under the corridor of the classroom, teaching children to sing children's songs. The green shade of midsummer is verdant. Her singing is more pleasant than this midsummer season. Lilei stood by the moon cave door and listened quietly, looking at the girl's beautiful and calm profile, and suddenly he sincerely thanked Pei Xian. Thank you for not cherishing her, thank you for letting me get a big deal. He just wanted to open the WeChat moments and give Mr. Pei Xian 32 likes. After staying in the orphanage for a whole day, Xiaoling said goodbye to the children and followed Lilei back to the city. Lilei drove her home and said to her, "If you want to see them in the future, I will take you there." She smiled lightly and said yes, then stood in front of the fence gate and kissed him goodbye. Not far away, there is another villa. There is a man standing in an inconspicuous place on the terrace. He is holding onto the railing as white as jade and looking at the two people kissing expressionlessly. His fingers are tightened and the veins on the back of his hands are exposed. "Sir." Jo Ma didn't dare to dissuade her, but she still had to bite the bullet and said, "Go in, you have been standing here for most of the day, the wind is strong, you can catch a cold easily." The news said that Miss Ye and Tianyi's big boss Lilei went to the orphanage where Mr. Lilei adopted Miss Xiaoling for charity today. So, the husband didn't know why he was crazy, but he just stood guard on the terrace, waiting for Miss Ye to return. Joe's mother didn't understand what he was waiting for. Even Pei Xian himself didn't understand. What happened to his Xiaoling taking another man to the place where they first met? Did she forget that she once said? She said it was a holy place that only belonged to the two of them. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 608. Chapter 608 Conspiracy. But now, she brought someone else with her. Pei Xian hoped that her trip to the orphanage with Lilei would end on bad terms, so he waited here for her return to see with his own eyes whether her mood was okay. What was waiting was the unsightly man who took her home and stood by the low fence and kissed her passionately. Pei Xian tightened his fingers and his eyes darkened. He looked at the man and woman embracing each other not far away, and took out his mobile phone. "Chu Chen, make an appointment with Li Shanhe, we need to meet." Li Shanhe is the name of the old man of the Li family. Mother Zhou on the side was a little frightened when she heard this. "What does he want to do, sir?" The next day, there were numerous reports in the news, all saying that Xiaoling, as a charity ambassador, accompanied Lilei, the boss of Tianyi, to the orphanage to make a large-scale donation. In the photo, she is standing next to Lilei with a slight smile. The donation document in her hand looks very elegant and eye-catching. Public opinion aroused again, saying that she and Lilei were a perfect match and a model couple. A match made in heaven. Angry, Gu Lin threw something again. Glasses and magazines were swept to the floor, leaving the room in a mess. She still couldn't understand her hatred. She looked at the debris on the ground and gasped. The anger in her heart had nowhere to vent, and she yelled hysterically, "Where is Nangong Kinja? Tell her to get over here. Clean the house." She has been very addicted to tossing Nangong Kinja recently, and she often beats and scolds her if she doesn't stop for a little bit. In order to get pearl powder from her and use it as medicine to heal her face, Nangong Kinja could only swallow her anger and let her bully her. When she heard that Miss Gu was calling for someone again, she quickly dropped her broom and gloves and hurried from the toilet to Gu Lin's lounge. Gu Lin threw a cup at her, "So slow. Are you dead?" Nangong Kinja didn't dare to dodge, so she let the cup hit her shoulder hard, causing her face to change in pain. I guess there's a big bruise on my shoulder, that Gulin. She cursed in her heart, but on the surface, she just lowered her head and asked very submissively, "What are your orders, miss?" Her tragic situation and the word elder lady made Gulin feel much better. Not long ago, Nangong Kinja was a more distinguished socialite than Gulin, but what about now? If you offend Brother Xiaoliai, you deserve to have your family destroyed and be reduced to cleaning toilets. Gulin felt happy and pointed at the ground arrogantly, "What do you want me to do? Are you blind? Sweep all this away for me." Nangong Kinja didn't dare to talk back, so she responded obediently, then turned back to get a broom and came in to sweep the floor. The ground was in a mess. Nangong Kinja looked soft on her face, but she was happy in her heart. She didn't know who had offended Miss Gu this time. As long as this mentally retarded young lady was in a bad mood, she would be happy. However, this gloating mood only lasted a short moment. Soon, she saw the magazine soaked in tea on the ground. On it, Xiaoling was wearing a simple and elegant plain blue dress, standing side by side with Li Lei, with a noble and reserved smile. On the side, there is a big title, Tianyi Charitable Foundation President Li Lei and spokesperson Ye Ling visited the orphanage to donate funds. How come? That bitch. Nangong Kinja glanced at 10 lines and quickly finished reading the article. The whole article was full of praise for Xiaoling, and she also praised her and Li Lei as gods and immortals, a perfect match. Nangong Kinja's expression was so angry that her hand holding the magazine was trembling. Suddenly, the magazine was opened with a slap. Nangong Kinja was caught off guard and took a step back. He looked up and saw Gulin. "I'm here to let you sweep the floor, not to let you watch the news." Gulin's voice was sharp. "Do you still think you are the eldest lady of the Nangong family? Is the news about Brother Xiaoliai something that like you can pay attention to?" she said, picking up a pot of hydroponic plants on the table and smashing it on the ground. The broken glass fragments splashed on Nangong Kinja's bare feet, which were wearing summer shoes. Nangong Kinja felt pain. But he didn't dare to cry out. "Let's clean this too," Gu Linyi ordered. Nangong Kinja lowered her head deeply and picked up the glass fragments on the ground bit by bit. She was still staring at the magazine from the corner of her eyes. Xiaoling's bright smile on it was so dazzling. Her fingers unconsciously grasped it, but unexpectedly they were pricked by fragments and blood flowed out. Ling. Looking at the thin and winding blood, the hatred in Nangong Kinja's heart grew like poisonous weeds. If it hadn't been for that woman, her Nangong family would not have gone bankrupt and collapsed, and her face would not have been disfigured and trampled in the mud. Everything she lost must be made up for by Ling. Amidst Gulin's taunts and curses, while cleaning the garbage on the floor, she carefully recalled the reports in the magazine. Gradually, a plan took shape in her mind. "Miss Gu," she raised her head and looked at Gulin pretending to be the most sincere and innocent, "I hate Ling as much as you do. I even dream of ruining that woman's reputation. Please give me a chance, let me give you some advice to deal with that Ling." Gulin was stunned and looked at her suspiciously. "Please believe me." Nangong Kinja threw away the broom, knelt down at Gulin's feet, and said something against her will in a weeping voice. "My Nangong family was bankrupted by Ling. The family was ruined and there was a sea of blood and sworn hatred. I must let that be ruined. Miss Gu, I have fallen to this point now. There is no way that young Master Li will like me again." She suppressed her nausea and said to Gulin flatteringly, "You are so noble. She is so beautiful, and she and young Master Li are childhood sweethearts. When that Ling is punished, isn't the throne of the young mistress of the Li family yours?" "I can't tell, but you are quite discerning." Gulin felt a little overwhelmed by the flattery. Nangong Kinja kept up her efforts. "So, Miss Gu, we must kill Ling." Don't let that become a stumbling block for you to ascend to the throne of the Li family's young mistress. What you said makes some sense. Gu Lin looked at her carefully. Then tell me, how can you ruin that bitch's reputation? Nangong Kinja showed a cold and malicious smile, stood up, and said something like this to Gu Lin. Very good. Gu Lin also laughed. Yes, Yingling, I think you, a little bitch, will not die this time. 1 week later, Xiaoling received a call from the orphanage and asked if she had time to go to the orphanage again. Xiaoling checked her schedule. The response to her last debut concert was so good that Lin Yunan and Wei Shaiyin decided to strike while the iron was hot and immediately arrange a nationwide concert tour for her. Counting it all together, it's only a few days since the first tour. Is there anything going on at the orphanage? She said on the phone. If you are short of money or have any requirements, you can directly talk to the person in charge of the foundation. I have a busy schedule recently and I'm afraid I won't be able to make it. End of this chapter. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 609. Chapter 609 Sudden Crisis. The hospital said, it's not about money. They told Xiaoling that since the last time she taught the children to sing, the children had admired her very much and were eagerly looking forward to seeing her and hearing her sing again. Tomorrow, Tianyi Charity Foundation will send a batch of supplies to the orphanage. How about Miss Ye come with us? The hospital invited. Tomorrow, Xiaoling pondered for a moment. She originally planned to take a beauty sleep tomorrow to adjust her condition, and then set off to other cities to prepare for a concert tour the day after tomorrow. Unable to resist the hospital's warm invitation, she finally cancelled her beauty sleep and agreed to go to the orphanage again to visit the children. The next day, the sky is clear and cloudless. Xiaoling wore a light beige dress, her long hair was loosely, and she wore a gardenia bracelet on her jade-white wrist. She went to the orphanage in a simple yet beautiful way. The children were indeed very happy when they saw her. They gathered around, laughed and took photos with her. She also likes to get along with children, teach them songs, play games with them, and have a lot of fun. Towards evening, a teacher came over to distribute medicine and said to the children, "This is an anthelmintic medicine sent by the Charity Foundation. Each person has 2 tablets. Let's take it now." Children lined up to get medicine. Xiaoling looked at the white pills with some curiosity and asked the teacher, "Anthelmintics?" The teacher said with a smile, "Yes, children are prone to parasites in their intestines. It is best to deworm them regularly once a year. The orphanage is financially tight, so this year's deworming has not been done yet. Thanks to the medicine sent by Tianyi Charity Foundation. Miss Ye, you and Mr. Li are both good people." Xiaoling was in a good mood and said a few words of modesty. On the side, a photographer from Tianyi came over with a camera. Seeing that she was chatting happily with the teacher, he said, "Miss Ye, you are our ambassador. Please give some pills to the children. Let me take some photos so that we can send out a press release when we get back." This was also requested by the supplier of the anthelmintic medicine. They heard that it was for charity and readily offered to provide the medicine for free, but they hoped to take pictures of the medicine and Ms. Yexinling. Enhance the visibility of their products. Of course, the supplier added, "If it's inconvenient, don't force it. It's just a matter of effort." The people from the Charity Foundation agreed to give it a try. It would be great if Ms. Ye could agree to take photos. Now it seems that she is lucky and she did not refuse. She took the pills from the teacher and distributed them to the children. The breeze blew her long hair, her face was slightly bowed, her eyes were smiling, peaceful and beautiful. The photographer captured a few more angles, and she looked as pure as an angel under the faint sunlight. Some girls are born to be liked by others. Regardless of whether they have stunning looks or not, they all have their own charm that makes people yearn for and admire them. The photographer felt that it was right to let Ms. Ye be the spokesperson of the charity foundation. She was born to be a spokesperson, her posture was natural and unpretentious, and her every move was the embodiment of beauty. That afternoon, this set of photos was posted online, and countless fans reposted and liked them. Even many passers-by who were not fans of her before were moved by her good deeds and said, whether it's a genuine love for orphans or a show, society needs people like her to care for the disadvantaged. Her popularity has skyrocketed. Xiaoling and the children spent a pleasant day. In the evening, they said goodbye and went home. The huge villa was empty, without the hustle and bustle of the day, and she suddenly felt a little lonely. I don't know what Lilei is doing today. She took out her cell phone and called him. It's nothing, I just miss you. Her voice was soft and waxy on the phone. On the other end, Lilei smiled gently, I miss you too. I saw the news report today, you are very beautiful. She was even more happy to be praised by her beloved. She turned over on the large and soft feather bed with her mobile phone in her arms and said, the children are also very cute. I played games with them today. You don't know, she chattered. The ground told him a lot. He listened with a smile on the other end of the phone, and finally said good night to her, go to bed early. She reluctantly took up the thread and fell asleep. Woke up in the morning, turned around, and saw the cell phone vibrating on the bedside table. She vaguely remembered that she accidentally silenced her cell phone yesterday, and she didn't know who called so early. The morning sun shines softly on the bed. She reached for the phone and the vibrating stopped. When I opened the communication records, I was shocked. I saw 15 Lilei, 12 Sister Mai Na, 10 Lin Yunan, and Wei Shaiyan, Feng Kun, Luo Luo, and others. The total number of Lin was nearly 100. Missed calls. Is it the end of the world? She was so frightened that she woke up from her drowsiness. She dialed the nearest missed call, which was from Lin Yunan. Lin Yunan opened his mouth and scolded her, you are already a big star, little diva. How come you are as reckless as a newly debuted trainee and go out to attend public events without a manager? Without a manager? Are you crazy for asking people to take pictures with pills? Well, now that something happened to the pills and a whole group of children in the orphanage were poisoned, do you know how many people are calling you an idiot? This is considered trivial, and you are said to be evil and wicked. I ask you to go to hell, why don't you die? He spoke in a rapid-fire manner. Xiaoling was dumbfounded and barely grasped the key point. You mean, there was something wrong with the batch of deworming medicine distributed to the orphanage yesterday? The children were collectively poisoned. She sat up from the bed nervously, his voice was trembling, are the children okay? You should worry about yourself first. Lin Yunan was furious, get up quickly, change into more solemn clothes, and hold an emergency press conference in an hour. You first apologize to the media and the public. Such a vicious incident, regardless of whether it was her fault or not, according to the rules of crisis public relations, she must first apologize. Otherwise, her image as a public figure will be ruined. I sent the press release to your mobile phone, and you know it by heart. Lin Yunan spoke very quickly, the entrance to your community is surrounded by reporters. Don't drive out in your Porsche. I have sent a car to pick you up. You waiting at home honestly? Okay, Xiaoling responded, while looking for clothes in the walk-in closet, still thinking about the children. How is the situation at the orphanage? Tell me quickly. Lin Yunan was rude again, to the effect that she was still pretending to be a virgin when she was about to die. However, after all, he couldn't see her uneasy look. In order to concentrate her energy and make the media conference proceed smoothly, he still said, 2 died, 19 were seriously ill, and 56 were hospitalized for observation. Others are more lucky and can just follow up with the doctor. Xiaoling's heart suddenly sank to the bottom. 2 people died. End of this chapter. Rebirth of the Entertainment Circle, Return of the Queen. Author, Xia Weining. Chapter 610. Chapter 610 Hitchhiking. Such a cute child, it's gone forever. Her body swayed, then barely stabilized, and she heard her own voice asking, "Who are the 2 dead?" "The 2 who took the medicine from you yesterday." The 2 in the photo. Lin Yunan was very irritable. "Why is he so unlucky?" She looked paler. "Remembering that I am a widower and a widower, is it possible that even such a young child would be punished?" She was shaky and tried hard to remember. However, there were so many children taking medicine from her hand yesterday and photographers taking so many photos that she couldn't even recall which 2 photos were last on the news. The children's faces became blurry in her mind. Tears were gathering in her eyes. In her hazy vision, the walk-in closet was filled with high-end ready-made clothes, smelling of leather, dried flowers, and perfume. But she suddenly felt that all this was meaningless, even if she worked hard to become a big star and spent tens of billions on charity. In the end, will it end up harming innocent children? With her fingers, she unconsciously grasped a plain silk satin dress. The delicate dress wrinkled and became ugly little by little in her hands. Her tears fell on it. On the other end of the phone, Lin Yunan was urging, "Hurry up. The car will be here soon." She suddenly realized that now was not the time to feel sad. She hurriedly hung up the phone and found a long black skirt from the closet and put it on. That long skirt was extremely solemn, with a very orthodox cut, medium-length sleeves, and an ankle-length hem. She wore plain makeup, her long crow-green hair was simply pulled up with a silver hairpin, and she wore black high-heeled shoes and a light white handbag. She looked like she was mourning the deceased and sincerely apologizing. The media are sharp and even vicious, and she cannot let them find the slightest fault. After putting on her makeup, she took a deep breath and walked downstairs. A white business car drove up from the path and stopped at the door of her villa. A strange man got out of the car and said to her through the fence of the villa, "Miss Ye, get in the car quickly. I am sent by Tianyi Charity Foundation to pick you up." She was in a daze, pushed open the fence door, and was about to get into the car. Suddenly, I was stopped by someone. "Ms. Ye," a low, thick male voice. Xiaoling looked up and saw a tall bodyguard. It turned out to be Arnold, one of Li Lei's most trusted people. He appeared out of nowhere and stood between her and the commercial vehicle. "Arno, why are you here?" she asked. "The young master sent me to protect you," Arnold said briefly. Ever since she moved out of Li Lei's apartment, Li Lei had allocated half of his guard force to her. The previous murders of her by the Nangong family were all solved by these bodyguards quietly without letting her know. But this time, it won't work. Arnold was a little scared. Because of their negligence, they actually let this car in. Although this car did not look like it contained a killer, the camera lens in the dark car reflected light, and the man in front of him had some flickering eyes. The look in their eyes clearly showed that they were not good people. "Paparazzi, right," he turned his head and said to the commercial vehicle, "Hurry up, otherwise, we at Tianyi are not easy to mess with." Xiaoling was stunned. The strange man who just invited Xiaoling to get in the car smiled awkwardly and said, "Misunderstandings are all misunderstandings." Seeing that there was no advantage to be gained, he got into the car and drove away. Xiaoling's heart was beating wildly. She was almost tricked into getting into that car. If it was the paparazzi, it would still be a light thing. If it was some evil force, she would not even have time to cry. "Arnold, thank you," she was shocked and said to Arnold. Arnold said, "Miss Ye, you don't have to be polite, this is our duty." After saying that, he connected his communicator, and after a while, he said to Xiaoling, "The car sent by Tianyi to pick you up encountered a man nearby. It was a small car accident, and we are still waiting for a tow truck. I am afraid that the paparazzi car just came from the news nearby, and they came to trick you into getting into the car on the spur of the moment, hoping to get exclusive news. Fortunately, the paparazzi were not professional in matters like kidnapping, so he saw the flaw at a glance. Xiaoling is focused on another thing. The car that came to pick her up encountered a small car accident nearby. She looked at the time. Half an hour had passed since she received a call from Lin Yunan, put on makeup and went out. Lin Yunan told her to arrive at the media conference within an hour. Is it too late? She was planning to go to the garage and drive out her Porsche. Suddenly, I saw a Rolls-Royce parked next to me. Get in the car. The rear seat window rolled down, revealing Pei Xian's cold, godlike face. Xiaoling was startled. She didn't expect to meet him at this juncture. Although they lived very close to each other, due to her deliberate avoidance, there were not many opportunities to meet him. She instinctively refused. No, I have my own car. Your Porsche is known to people all over the world, Pei Xian said. Now, the entrance to the community is full of media, fans, and angry protesters. If you don't believe it, you can try it. Driving that car, it's simply, there is no way to go 10 meters out of the community door. She fell silent, knowing that most of what he said was true. Are you in a hurry? Pei Xian said calmly. I saw the news. You have a press conference in half an hour. Get in my car and I will take you there. Xiaoling was in a dilemma, weighing the priorities. Pei Xian was not in a hurry and waited for her very patiently. Time waits for no one. After a few seconds, Xiaoling felt relieved and said to Arnold, I'll take Pei Xian's car and leave. Arnold, don't worry, I'll be fine. Arnold had vaguely heard about her entanglement with Emperor Boss Pei, and also knew that the owner of the Rolls-Royce in front of him was his boss's mortal enemy. However, it was going to rain, and the mother was getting married, so why did his boss not have it? What about dispatching a car? The company car also had a minor accident. He silently gave his boss a candle in his mind and watched the future boss's wife get into another man's car. The Rolls-Royce is very quiet. Pei Xian took out a sandwich from the car's small refrigerator and gave it to her. The news came out early yesterday morning. I was afraid that you didn't have breakfast, so I asked Mama Jo to make a sandwich and juice. Speaking, he handed her the freshly squeezed orange juice. When he said it, she remembered that she had indeed not eaten breakfast, but she had no appetite. She just shook her head and said, No, thank you. Pei Xian said gently, this kind of press conference is very physically demanding. It is your first time to conduct such a serious crisis public relations, so you have no experience. Do you know? Many sharp questions on the scene can humiliate and stimulate people to collapse. You have to eat. Having something to eat and having a full stomach will help stabilize your mood. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, all your efforts to restore your image will be in vain. She then took the food and ate it in small bites. End of this chapter.